These 10 tips will help you to make your practice more effective, which will then make it more enjoyable. So this is now the 4th week in a row where I've done a video about how to practice and practice tips, and it's really been a lot of fun doing this sort of mini series on practicing. If you want to catch up on any of those, of course you can look at the YouTube channel and see the past week's videos, or if you've subscribed, then you've maybe been watching all of these as they've come out. But I've also put all the resources together in one easy place. So if you go to www.quickstartclarinet.com/practice, then you can put in your name and email address to get the download of the Ultimate Practice Guide, which I did as the first video in this series. But then also if you scroll down on that page, you can see the 4 videos that I did right on that page, so you don't have to worry about searching through YouTube or anything like that. And I may add some more of past practice videos that I've done there and future practice videos and maybe even some future handouts that I make about practicing. So check out quickstartclarinet.com/practice and see all of the resources that I have about how to practice. So for this top 10 tips video, I also sort of split it up into 3 bigger categories. You know how I like my 3-step processes and 3 categories of things, but I think that'll help to sort of keep this a little bit more broad and a little bit more organized as you're going through these specific practice tips that I recommend. So the first big section is to organize, and this is going to have a lot of stuff that's included in the Ultimate Practice Guide that hopefully you've watched that video, because that one goes really, really in depth with how to organize your practicing. But I think there's a couple other tips that I want to point out here that I think will be helpful. So number 1 is to just set goals, and that'll allow you to track your progress towards those goals. This is really what the Ultimate Practice Guide is all about, is to set the goals and make a plan to reach the goals. And I think that's really, really important and really effective to be thinking about what you want to achieve and then seeing how you're doing on achieving that, because practicing is a really long-term process. So if you sort of have that long-term view of how things are going, that'll be really encouraging to help motivate you throughout the process. Tip number 2 is to plan your time. This comes down to actually, again, the Ultimate Practice Guide, filling it out and planning exactly what you're gonna do in each practice session so that you know, you get into the practice room, you know exactly what you need to do. You don't need to waste any time sort of like fumbling around or just playing random stuff. I don't know, I've never done that personally in my practicing. I don't know what you're talking about. But having that list of exactly what you wanna do will make your practice time so much more efficient. The other part of planning your time that is really important is just having a consistent practice schedule and practice routine. I love the idea of having sort of a sacred practice time where it's like every day from noon to 2 or 5 to 7 or 9:30 to 10, whatever the timing is, like that's your practice time, and you like have that scheduled in your calendar. You don't schedule things over it. Like that's when you're going to be practicing, and you go in and do it, and you do that consistently. That consistency in all of this process is what's going to help us get to whatever our goals may be. And tip number 3, which is the final tip in the organize section, is to warm up. I know this maybe is more about like something to actually do, but I think it has a lot to do with organization and really taking the time to actually do a warm-up. And remember, when I say warm-up, I don't mean just like test your reed or do whatever. I mean like actually practice the fundamentals, dig into the 3-step warm-up, and really go over those things that are going to make your clarinet playing great long term. If you skip this stuff, all the other stuff that you play for the day is going to be harder, and it's also going to diminish your improvement over time. The warm-ups, and we're really working on the fundamentals, are the time to master the instrument. So if you want to be a masterful clarinet player, you need to take that time to do the warm-ups and organize that time into your schedule and into your plan. I promise, even if you're cramming for a concert that's in a week or 2, you're going to be better off taking 20 minutes even to do an actual warm-up every single day rather than just skipping that and cramming for the concert. All right, now moving on to the next big section. This section is going to be called Simplify. Simplifying is all about what to do when you're actually doing the practicing and you're in the practice room working through your music, working through your warm-ups. And this is all about making things easy for ourselves so that we can get really good at doing them. So the first simplify tip, which is tip number 4, is to slow down. Slow practice is the absolute most important and easiest way to simplify things. And honestly, slowing down doesn't always simplify things. It sort of opens up your mind to the possibilities and the realization of what's actually happening. Sometimes when you play through something really quickly, you may feel like you did an okay job and you're really concentrating on playing the notes and going fast enough to play it at the whatever tempo you're going, and you don't notice all of the things that can be going wrong. Whereas if you slow it down to like half speed from whatever fast tempo you're doing, you'll start to hear all of the imperfections in your articulations or your note connections. All of that stuff will become much more obvious, and your brain will have time to process and fix and work through all of those things so that you can actually do it better once you get up to the fast speed. Really, if you aren't spending like half of your time going under tempo on whatever piece you're doing, at least half of the time under tempo, then you're really not going to be able to hear all of the details that you really need to fix. In fact, I'm so passionate about really wanting you to practice more slow. I want to give you a little bit of a challenge. So once you're done watching this video, the next time you practice, I want you to take something that you think that you play pretty well. Maybe it's not perfect, maybe it's a new piece that you're learning or a technical passage that you pretty much have down, but maybe still needs some ironing out. And I want you to practice that at half speed. And I want you to leave a comment with what was different and what things that you noticed going half speed that you weren't able to notice going full speed. And then I hope you fix those and are able to translate that up to the full speed as well. All right, tip number 5 is to break it down. So I always like to say that playing music is in itself really, really simple. Dynamics are simple, articulations are simple, fingerings are simple. The trick is layering all of those simple things together, and that's where things can start to get a little bit complicated. So what I mean by break it down for this tip is to take those layers, those simple layers, and pull them out and just work on one of them at a time. This is where you can get really creative with your practice techniques. This may be something if you're going for dynamics, for example. Maybe you just hold the first note of a phrase, imagine through how the phrase goes, and sort of do the dynamics on that one note for what the phrase would be. So that way you don't have to worry about the rhythms, you don't have to worry about the notes and the fingerings, you don't have to worry about the articulations, you're just going for the dynamics. And then once you have a plan for that and you know what air it takes, then you can start adding in the other layers. Same thing can go for articulation. Say that you have a scale that you have to tongue through, maybe like in Mendelssohn's Scherzo or something like that, and you're having a hard time lining up the tonguing and the fingers, you can do each of those on their own. So just play one note and tongue through the rhythm and tongue through the pattern. This also works really well if you have lots of different articulations, if it's like maybe long, short, long, and it's those contrasting articulations. Just do it on one note so you can put 100% of your effort on the articulation. And then you can also do it slurring, so you can put 100% of your effort on the fingers and the finger coordination. And then you put those two simple layers together and you're able to do that more complicated task of tonguing and precisely lining that up with your fingers. And that brings us to tip number 6, which is to build it back up. This is a bit of a long-term process, but it's a really important part of the process. This is the part where we go from practicing slow or practicing that one simplified, broken down piece of it, the puzzle, and then putting all of that together and speeding it up to the end result that we want. So the way to do this is to just sort of add one thing at a time and really make sure that you're maintaining all of the other things that you've built up. So for speed, this is really obvious. You play slow enough that you can super confidently get every single detail that you want, and then go a tiny bit faster, and a tiny bit faster, and a tiny bit faster. And if at any point you feel like you're not having as clean of playing or getting all of the details exactly how you want as you get faster and faster, then just go back down and do more repetitions at that slow tempo so you can build that into your brain, really get that going, and then again continue gradually speeding up. Same thing goes for the layers that you've broken down and putting those back together. Say you've done your one note to get the phrasing and get all the dynamics, so that's great. Now do just the notes, maybe don't worry about the articulation, and add that together and make sure that you're able to get the phrasing that you want with the actual pitches, then add on the articulation, and then you're pretty much good to go. Once you have the notes, rhythms, and the dynamics and articulations, that's pretty much all there is to it. So once you can add all of those layers together, but make sure that when you're focusing on the articulation and adding on the articulation, you still have that phrasing that you started with, so that you're maintaining the stuff that you did when you simplified it and broke it down, and then adding that into the big picture in the final version. All right, next up is our final section, which is mindset. Having the right mindset when you practice is one of the most important things, because it allows you to sort of stay positive and know that you're going to be getting better, and it'll help you to not get frustrated with things that you're struggling with, and it'll also help you to really go for the quality that you want rather than just sort of not worrying about it or not caring about it. So tip number 7 is less is more. This has to do sort of with the idea of quality over quantity. In this case, say, even when you're practicing your fundamentals and doing your warm-up, if you're gonna spend, say, 10 minutes practicing your scales, it's actually much more beneficial for you to do like 2 scales in those 10 minutes and get them really, really high quality, where you're really confident with your finger motion, you know exactly what the notes are gonna be, you're maybe able to even speed it up a little bit and maintain that confidence as you get into some faster tempos on those 2 scales, rather than spending the 10 minutes to go through the 12 scales and sort of miss some notes here and there and sort of be rushing through it. That being said, sometimes it is good to sort of challenge yourself and see how many you can get through, but as a rule of thumb, when you're practicing, you want to do less at a higher quality. This, of course, also goes for your music itself. Instead of planning to do like 2 pages worth of music in your practice, maybe think about doing 2 phrases, and imagine how much of the details you'll be able to dig into if you spend like 30 minutes on 2 phrases and really pick it apart and find all of those details in there and make sure that the details are really high quality and you're able to execute it really consistently. That's how professionals are able to play so consistently and so well, is by really going in after those details on small sections at a time, so that you can really concentrate and really focus, rather than being overwhelmed with trying to put together 2 pages and sort of rushing through it and not having the very best quality as you go through all of it. Tip number 8 sort of ties into that, and that's don't leave mistakes. I find this so common in all of my students and even myself sometimes, where we'll be playing through something and we'll make a mistake and just sort of keep going. And yes, it's good to do that sometimes when you're performing or something like that, or you're practicing performing, and you want to get used to sort of going through mistakes and not worrying about them. But you should only do that like maybe 10% of your practice time. The other 90%, huge majority of the time that you're practicing, you want to catch the mistakes right away. So if you're playing along and you play a wrong note, just stop and be like, nope, that wasn't the right note. Don't play that note, brain. Go back and fix it with the right note in there. And I'm sure most of you typically do that when you play a wrong note, for example, but the mistakes don't just mean wrong notes. It can also be wrong rhythms. Even if you're not confident, like maybe you're playing a triplet passage or there's some like dotted notes in the passage and you're like, I'm not really sure I'm actually like subdividing that right or playing exactly the right rhythm. That counts as a mistake. So just go back and really figure it out and really fix it. This is sort of like what I was talking about with the quality over quantity. Don't just go through and haphazardly get whatever you get. Really have a plan for what you want, know the quality that you're aiming for, and be really picky about yourself to get that quality on every single note and every single detail in the music. Speaking of details in the music, that brings us to tip number 9, which is to explore the details. This is where practicing can get really fun, and this is all about knowing the music and finding all of those details that the composer put on the page for you to explore and for you to execute as a performer. I find a lot of times when we practice, we're mainly focused on the technique of the instrument, especially when it's famous pieces that we've heard recordings of and we know exactly how it goes or how it's supposed to go. We just sort of have that image in our mind and we're like, okay, clarinet, like make that happen, do that. But I think it would be a lot more fun to practice if we spent more time actually exploring the musical ideas and making some musical decisions for ourselves rather than just trying to play how a recording of somebody else has done it. This, of course, means that you're going to have to do a little bit of work to do some analysis of the music for yourself. But for me, and maybe I'm just a giant nerd, I actually really enjoy going into some of those details and looking for the patterns and saying like, oh, that's interesting. Here's an appoggiatura with a diminuendo on it, but here's an appoggiatura without a diminuendo on it. Maybe we should probably diminuendo there and probably diminuendo because it's an appoggiatura anyways. But going through some of those details and really getting into the music, seeing like, this section is exactly the same as this section that comes back later, but later there's some different dynamics and different articulations. So that's probably interesting and something that I should bring out. Or maybe you could also say, hey, these different dynamics and articulations, I think they should be the same as the first one. Another way that you can explore the details of the music is, say you have like a ritardando at the end of a phrase or something like that. You can really experiment with different ways of pacing that, sort of think through what the composer may have wanted, what the feel of the music is here, and the emotions that you're trying to convey, and the reason why that ritardando is there, and get a really good plan for how you want to pace that, and then try it and see how you like it and how it sounds when you do that, and try multiple different versions so you can see what you like the best. And maybe that varies from day to day, what you like the most, and you can sort of decide in the moment what you want to do. But by practicing and exploring the details in your practice, that builds up your arsenal for exactly how you want to play this and gives you the flexibility to really do what you want to do and hopefully convey the emotions that you want to convey in the actual performance. And finally, tip number 10, which is probably the most important, is to trust the process. Another way of saying this maybe is to be patient and just know that if you're putting in your work and you're doing the practicing each day and you're really going for really high quality in your playing, then you're gonna get there eventually. It may seem like, oh, I have to play this piece like next month. If I only go one phrase at a time, I'm never gonna know the whole thing by that performance. But if you really just go through the whole thing every single day, then you're also probably not going to know the whole thing by the performance. You're going to be much more effective by just going through and really taking your time to learn it. Because if you do one phrase and get it great, do the next phrase and get it great, do the next phrase and get it great, then in a month you'll have 30 practice sessions to get 30 phrases going really well. And of course we want to spend some time like putting those together and getting the big picture flow of things, but just trust the process that time is going to go past and you're going to put in your time in the practice room and you're going to get better. How quickly you get better really comes down to how effective you are with your practicing and how much of these tips that you're able to implement and the other practice strategies that you have, and how efficient that is. But no matter how efficient you are, you're going to get better as long as you put in the time. So just trust the process, do everything you can to improve the efficiency of your practicing, but also know that really the only thing that's going to make you better is just doing the time. And as long as you're practicing and doing that, then you're going to get better. Just trust the process. All right, that's it for my top 10 practice tips. Don't forget, if you want to see more of the videos from this practice series, you can check out the YouTube channel, or you can also go to www.quickstartclarinet.com/practice, and you'll be able to scroll down on that page to see all the videos. You can also put in your name and email address to get the Ultimate Practice Guide, which is an awesome resource that sort of helps you to organize your practice and plan out exactly what you want to do. I have a whole video about that if you want to watch that, and of course that's on the page at quickstartclarinet.com/practice. So thank you so much for watching this one. Leave it a like, leave a comment with any tips that you think I may have missed, and of course subscribe to the channel where I upload practice and clarinet tips every single Saturday morning. recording. I would love to see you in another video, and I will see you in another video.